And just for the record, we are streaming on YouTube. In just a few seconds, there will be a feed that's going on to the social media channels. We aren't recording yet, but we will be recording in just a few moments. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome. All right, so we are streaming on YouTube, so I will go ahead and make just a quick announcement for those of you that are just joining us. If you're just joining us, thank you for, first of all, spending your time with us this evening. We are going to get started with our Community Steering Committee meeting in just a few moments. And while we're waiting, if you are on the Zoom line today, we do ask that you please make sure that your screen name is updated. And the instructions for doing that are on the screen now. If you have any issues, we will gladly give you a hand. Just flag that by raising your hand, either your real hand or your virtual hand, or typing in the chat, and we're happy to make that edit for you. The other thing to note is that you might see some changes made to your screen name even after you make that change, and that's fine. The team behind the scenes is going to prepare for a possible vote like we do for every meeting, so we like to make sure that we flag all of our CSC members in advance to make sure that it's a quick and expedited voting process if we have one. We're going to get started in just a couple of moments. Thanks for being here. It actually looks like we've got a pretty good group and we've got a strong agenda. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started in honor of everyone's time. I do see that we are already recording, and I do see that we're live on YouTube. And I don't see anything in our chat, so we're going to go ahead and get going. All right, well, good evening. My name is Erica Manuel. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit organization called ILG, and I am happy to lead the facilitation team for this AB 617 community, along with my team members, Hannah and Julia. They are waving right now. You might see them on your screens. We are here to help you with any problems you have throughout tonight's meeting. And we are committed to having inclusive processes. And so we always like to make sure that everyone has access to our meeting, both language and otherwise. And so we, I believe, are already set up with Douglas and Mark, our interpretation. But if there are any issues during our meeting, we may stop just to make sure that Douglas and others have access as needed. We've had a lot of Zoom meetings over the last few months, actually, believe it or not, guys, over the last year plus. And so we're going to dispense with a lot of the Zoom logistics for the sake of time today. But we are going to go to the next slide and show some Zoom reminders to refresh your memory. Couple quick things. Please make sure that your screen name is accurate. And remember that we are happy to rename you if you have any challenges renaming yourself manually. If you're on a cell phone or if you're on a tablet, it can get a little tricky. We're happy to help you out. If you are in the stipend program for residents in the AB 617 communities, you will need to stay in this meeting for 75% of the meeting time to get credit for the meeting. And that's something that I think you're pretty used to now, but we're happy to always remind you. And then this meeting is being recorded, and there will be public comments for the meeting at the end. These CSC meetings are always open to the public. We are grateful to the public members that participate on Facebook or YouTube or social media channels throughout the evening. Any members of the public on the Zoom line will be asked to participate in the public comment portion of the meeting at the very end. And as always, throughout the meeting, the comments and the questions that are posted on social media or submitted via email will be addressed during that public comment period at the very end. We did also flag for you that the meeting is being recorded. You should also get a notice when you log in that the meeting is being recorded. So before we move to any other portion of the agenda, I want to ask if there are any participants that are logging on by phone or on other devices that need to be checked or renamed for attendance purposes, just to make sure that if you're a resident or a voting member of the CSC, that you are tracked appropriately. Is there anybody that we need to ask about or rename?
Erica, I don't see, I think we got everyone. Julia, can you confirm? I think we got everyone.
There might be a
It looks
few
like we
outstanding.
Gloria.
Yes.
Gloria.
Looks like Nate, we just have to drop you in as a CSC member, and then I don't think there's anybody else that
Gloria, yes.
right now.
We have a first name Gloria, she, her,
Yes,
and
I'm here.
we don't have the last name.
I just sent the last name in the chat, but it's Gloria Alonso.
Thank you, Gloria.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gloria. And welcome. Perfect. All right. So now we'll turn it over to the Air District hosts for them to just say a few words about the meeting before we discuss the agenda and the background. Julia, you can stop share.
Yeah, just good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Like Erica mentioned, we have a jam-packed agenda and looking forward to the conversation and the guidance that you can provide to us and continuing to help in this effort. So just appreciate everybody and your time and participation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. All right, well, let's get back to the agenda slide. Tonight's agenda is actually going to be showing on your screens in just a few seconds. Tonight's meeting started at 5 and should end at around 7. We plan to have a 2-hour meeting. The first thing on the agenda, as you will see, is some standing updates. We have had to go through this pretty quickly in the past, and you'll see today we kind of swapped that item. So we're going to start with an air monitoring update, and then we're going to hear from Carb. And then we'll discuss enforcement of the air quality rules and regulations. Both the Air District staff and Carb are going to weigh in on that topic, which is really important for this AB 617 conversation. And then we're going to move to discussion of the charter. And as you see, there is a potential vote on that item. We've had some really productive discussions about the charter for the past few meetings. And today is the possibility of a vote to adopt the amendments that you've requested and the amendments that the Air District has made at your request. So you should have received the latest version of the charter via a link in an email, 2 emails. The latest one came today. So that's the version that will be reviewed today, and you'll see the amendments that have been made and be able to make a discussion as a group on whether you're ready to move that forward. And then we're going to move into a wrap up and public comment. Our role today is to be your neutral facilitator, and we certainly don't have a community co-host tonight, so we're going to be looking to all of you for insights about how best to make sure that our conversation is informative, that it's productive, that it's in line with the goals that you have as CSC members. We do always want to make sure that we have a wide variety of voices that are heard and incorporated and that the meeting agenda is fully covered. We also want to try and leave enough time for public comment, which sometimes means we'll have to limit the discussion a little bit and move items along. Also wanted you to note in that agenda that we do have a possible voting item, which means we're going to try and stay as close as we can to being on time to allow enough time for that item to be taken up at the allotted time as you have requested. So that being said, this is your meeting. We want to honor the valuable discussion, meaningful discussion, and what that means to you. So we'll just work together with you, each of you throughout the night to make sure that this moves at the right speed for you. And then last and not least, we always want to make sure that our conversation and the tone of our comments is respectful to your fellow attendees. On this slide are just some of the tips that you've seen before for sharing the virtual space. I know we have some new attendees on the line today, and so these are specifically for CSC members, but it's a good thing just to note to speak up when you can. Participation is so important. We love to hear from you, and your voice is always relevant and your opinion matters. If you can, and your space allows it, please keep your camera on. And please remember to focus your chat comments on the current topic, because those unrelated side discussions can be a little bit distracting for CSC members when they're trying to pay attention to the speaker, but also read comments. And then the next thing we'll say is to step up and step back. As a friendly reminder, speak up and then give your fellow CSC members the chance to do that as well. The next slide is just a reminder about how you can share this personal space. These are some additional tips and reminders. We will not read them. We've shown them before, but just we'll try to honor them as a group to make sure that everyone feels comfortable here and that this is a space for them to share their insights. And then we want to make sure that everyone has enough time to really feel as though they've had their voice heard. And again, it ties in nicely with the step up and step back slide. So now that we've given everyone enough time to join and get settled, I will ask for a stop share on the screen and ask if there are any questions about the agenda before we dive into the standing updates. I do see a hand from Mary Elizabeth, so we'll start there.
Hi, so you mentioned that there was the charter that was sent out with the invitation, and there was another charter that was sent out today, and that's the one that we're going to be looking at. Is there any difference between those two charters?
There is a version that's different. Oh, Ryan, I think was going to say something, but there is a slight difference, yes, and that's why they updated the link. The first link was showing an older version of the edits. So the link from today is showing the latest version, and that's the one we're going to walk you through today. Okay. Any other questions before we move into standing updates? Wonderful. I don't see any, and so I'm going to ask for a couple quick things. So standing updates is the first item on the agenda, and we're going to hear about air monitoring, and we're going to hear from Carb. But there have been some developments on the school district front. And so I'm first going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's going to turn it over to Gil to give you kind of an update on what's happening in that space as it relates to air monitoring, and then we'll move forward with that agenda item.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So just as a refresher for everybody, we've gone through the process of working with the air monitoring subcommittee and identifying locations, pretty much all of them at schools, listening to the steering committee's desires to make sure that the community air monitoring focused on having monitoring at schools. And so,
Not necessary.
we had a good, partnership and with Gil. So once we had heard and got the feedback from the entire steering committee to move forward, we worked with Gil on visiting all of the sites and identifying locations where those could be installed. And then we worked on a license agreement that would allow the district to install that equipment with Gil and with the school district's legal counsel. Really appreciate all of Gil's efforts to get that quickly done and get that to the school board. And so last week, I know many of you had received some information through email from some of the CSC committee members. Last week, they did take the license agreement that would allow us to install the equipment at the school sites to the school board. And during that meeting, the vote of the school board was 3-3. So there was not approval to move forward with that item. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Gil to provide a little more information. But I just really wanted to take the opportunity to thank Gil for everything that he did in getting that item to the school board and helping us in that effort. So I'll turn it over to Gil. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, as we were saying, I hope you guys can hear me okay. The school board voted 3-3, and I'm not sure what the confusion was. Somehow they had linked a Department of Transportation grant that was going at the same time that required general funds, so matching funds of $2 million. Somehow I think they've got that confused with this program and thought that there was some other budgetary items. So the vote was 3-3. I've spoken with Maria Mendez, who's one of the board trustees or vice president, and she has asked Superintendent Ramirez to put it back on the next board meeting agenda so that they can re-vote on it and kind of hear whatever else we got to do. So those are the steps I've taken on my end, and I have a meeting with the superintendent also about this either Friday or first part of next week to make sure all that happens. Like I said, I'm very sorry for the confusion on that end. I think the vote was rushed to make sure, hopefully, to pass it. And like I said, I think it got lobbed in with the other agenda item that was there. So if you have any questions for me, I'm available for that. But that's what I know to this point. And as of yesterday evening, they're going to put it back on the agenda again to vote.
Yeah, one more thing I forgot to mention, and I think it's an important part. In the license agreement, that there was language in there to ensure that the school district was fully reimbursed for any expenses that they may incur as part of having that equipment out there. And then the district would cover any improvement costs to the location to be able to house the equipment. That was all in the license agreement.
Thank you both. Okay, so that's some news related to schools. Does anyone, before we move into any other updates on air monitoring, let's see if we've got any questions about the process. I do see some gratitude certainly in the chat for Gil and others that have definitely put a lot of time and effort into this process thus far. I see a hand from Margot.
Hi, yeah, I wasn't there. I didn't listen in. I saw some of the emails. It really seemed as though, yeah, there was a misunderstanding somewhere because, so Ryan, you just said that the air district would reimburse the schools, but I thought you also leased some of the space. You actually pay more money. Isn't that correct? Or is that just the single main air monitor that you're working on, the public health one? But I really thought that was part of the issue. And Gil, who would be in touch with these board members to find out what their issue is? Does the superintendent connect with them? How does that work at this point? Because to get a sense of what their concerns were.
We had presented you could read the whole draft of what it says, and that was actually the license agreement. It's a license agreement. District council recommended that it not be a lease agreement, but a license agreement. And that covers the costs for electricity that would be used by plugging in to the system there. That's all that was. So it's a nominal fee for each of those based on what Chai and I had worked on for other districts and for what it would use for the equipment that's being put out there. So in my opinion, humble opinion, I don't think they carefully looked at what each of them said. And specifically the license agreements spelled out what they're doing at no cost. Like I said, somehow it got confused where that and the Department of Transportation grant were combined for general funds. So I just think it happened too fast, and maybe the vote was taken too quickly on it, and board members didn't get enough chance to get questions and answers. But again, like other people have said, I appreciate Maria Mendez, speaking on our behalf and kind of describing it. I'm just not sure that the other board members had seen all the stuff that was in there and compared it. Because it was pretty explicit in the description of both things.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I see Debbie's hand and then Douglas.
Yes, I'm just wondering if there's kind of offshoot of Margot, if there is someone that can talk to the representatives that voted no on this and kind of get their gist as to why they voted no and resolve that issue with them before they even go to the meeting. So it's not a big process or another mix up the next time. Can that be done before? Can someone speak to them before? That's it.
As far as what I was doing, we had prepared documents for them. Like I said, they were pretty clear as to what was on there. The confusion may have been, like I said, with the Department of Transportation grant paperwork on the same night, thinking they were linked together, and they're not. That's been voted down, so that won't come up again. And so I'm hoping that confusion won't happen. But yes, I'm available. It's just really the only forms that go to it are executive cabinet meetings, which I'm not invited to, or the papers that are prepared in advance. But like I said, I will be checking with the superintendent and seeing what else he would like to make available to see how we can do this.
Erica, you're on mute.
Sorry, Douglas, I think I was on mute. You're up if you have a comment or question. My apologies.
Okay. Yes, I have a, yes, like regarding to the meeting, I was watching, listening there. My biggest concern that it was under a finance agenda on finance. And when I noted that when they hit the bus issue, they discussed about paying $25,000 they have to pay to get the bus and transfer. And that's how everything kind of escalate to the air monitor, and it, between the confusion between the same agenda in the same item in finance. So, but and then, even though it wasn't, I don't understand it would fall into the finance where it should be free, if there was no cost for them, but it had to fall in the category in the finance agenda. Why is that?
Douglas, I'm not sure where, I don't set the agenda or what areas they come up in, but those were the two items that they were done, 8.1 and 8.2. We were 8.2. I'm not sure why they got linked. I think there was some public comment though that just kind of linked the two ahead of time before they went to closed session. So again, I'm not sure, but I don't think there'll be the same issue on the next board meeting.
Oh, okay.
So Gil, I am seeing some questions and comments in the chat, and so I'll ask on behalf of some of the CSC members, is there anything that this CSC can do to support your efforts with moving this forward? I know that you're going to be bringing this back to the superintendent to find out what options exist either in placement or in the next round of discussions. Is there anything that this group can do to support you?
If I have any questions that come up or there's anything that needs to be done, I'll definitely address that in email back to the group or let Ryan send that out, whatever's appropriate. Like I said, in advance, we thought we had prepared everything a couple of weeks ahead of time, and there were no questions up to it. So, but I will definitely relay all of that.
Great. All right. Thank you both. I don't see any more hands, and I do see certainly in the chat everyone's interest in this and gratitude to Gil for support thus far and all the work that's been done. It sounds like there's just a bit of a hiccup and that there's some movement forward continued. There is going to be a follow-up by Gil if there's anything needed by this CSC in the next few days, certainly if it's going to be up for the next agenda item. And just to confirm, the next agenda, it could be placed on the agenda for the next committee or the next board meeting, school board meeting, which is next week, correct, Gil?
Yes, there's one next Tuesday, the 13th, and then there's one 2 weeks after that. So, like I said, the direction I heard was that it was going to be on the next board meeting or requested to be on. So I will update everybody as I hear anything, because I know that we've worked a lot on this and I'd like to keep you updated. So I will do that.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to any other air monitoring updates and then a carb update for the standing update. Anything else from the Air District on this topic or from Carb on your topic?
Yeah, I think that was pretty much the update in detail. I just wanted to express my appreciation and thanks to Gil. There was a tremendous amount of work that was involved in this, and he was extremely helpful in pushing this through. And also to Maria Mendez as well. She really advocated hard for us, but unfortunately, there's this, just didn't make it this time, but we'll do it next time.
Great. And then one note in the comments, this might be for Gil. Certainly, even if you don't need any additional information from the CSC, it sounds like some of them might be willing to provide public comment during that meeting. So if you are able to share the date and time of the meeting when it's confirmed, I think you might have some CSC members willing to provide some support in the form of public comments during that meeting to lend their voice as well.
Yeah, as soon as I get that date and make sure it's on the agenda, I'll send that out to everybody or to Ryan. That way we can get that forwarded. And you're always welcome to do public comments. I mean, there were plenty of them that night. So please, that would be great.
Excellent. Is there anyone from Carb tonight that has an update, a standing update?
Yeah, good evening. This is Scott Wall with the California Air Resources Board. Just wanted to highlight our plan at our upcoming board meeting to prioritize comments from members of the steering committee. You all got an email, I think, from the district that we asked them to send out last week. And so just wanted to, again, make sure that you were aware that what we're planning to do is at the board meeting where we're considering the Stockton SERP, right after the staff presentation, we will be prioritizing comments from members of the CSC before public comment period. But also want to make sure that it was very clear that attending this board meeting and providing comments are completely optional and voluntary. So there is certainly not something that you have to do or need to do. It's something that if you'd like to do it, we would welcome it. If you plan to provide comment to our board and would like to be prioritized before the public comment, please drop me an email or a phone call by Friday, July 16th. I'll drop my email and phone into the chat once I get wrapped up here. We need to know in advance to properly prepare for the Zoom logistics and ensure that you're identified appropriately in the Zoom webinar meeting format, which is different than the format that we use here for these CSC meetings. Also, a little added bonus, I will automatically register you for the board meeting using the email address that's on the steering committee roster, or you can also let me know if you'd like to use a different one. And then you'll receive a confirmation email once you're registered, which most likely would happen about a week or so before the meeting. So if I don't hear from you by Friday, July 16th, you will still be able to provide comment by raising your hand during the public comment period, which will be right after the CSC member comments. And you'll also need to register yourself once the registration opens, which is typically about 10 days before the meeting. And so what I'll also drop into the chat for you is a link out to our meeting dates, which is where all the documents will be opened up for you to register. And then I'll also, if you haven't seen the staff report that we produced, that was released, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, I'll drop a link to the staff report in chat as well, so you have easy access to it. And finally, you're also welcome to submit written comments if you're not comfortable doing a verbal comment at the board meeting. There's a link actually to that in the board meetings webpage as well. So with that, I'll ask if there's any questions that you might have. And if there are none, I'll hand it back and get busy dropping all of the things that I promised into the chat for you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for our CARB friends about the meeting or otherwise? If so, please raise your hand. It looks like there were a couple questions about whether or not this is a virtual or in-person meeting. It is another virtual meeting. And Delby is saying that it's virtual only at this time. No transition plan, it sounds like, just yet. I don't see any other questions for you, Scott. So thank you for that update, and thank you, Chai, and thank you, Gil. And I think we are ready to move on to our next agenda item. All right, so the next thing on the list is enforcement of air quality rules and regulations. And this is an update that's going to come also from CARB, but also a little bit from the Air District first. So we have 3 people that are going to provide a bit of a briefing on this piece. The Air District team is going to go first. That's Mike and Lisa, and then we'll turn it over to Eric from CARB.
All right. Good morning. Actually, we had a minor change, and Mike and Lisa are not going to be able to present. My name is John Cadret. I'm the compliance manager out of the Northern region, and I'm going to be presenting this to you today. Gosh, it's been a while since I've addressed a group this large, so please bear with me through whatever technology issues we might have. Now, do I need to post the presentation, or does someone already have it?
If you have your presentation, John, yes, you should share it if you've got that, just to make sure it's the latest version.
Let's see what we can do here without having too much technology problems. And
we see it.
You see it. Okay, perfect.
We do.
Perfect. Nice when technology works. So as I briefly said, my name is John Cadret. Just a little background. I've been with the Air District since it was formed and have been doing this for almost, a little over 30 years now. This was my first job out of college. I've been fortunate enough over the years to work in a variety of programs with the district and have spent the last 15-ish as a manager for the Northern region. So we'll roll into this and we'll take questions as we go, and I hope this is interesting and informative. So there we go. So the district enforcement program is, we have staff and inspectors that go out and look at different pieces of equipment and sites and monitor that they're meeting the requirements for air quality standards, such as the different permit conditions and requirements that they have. So there's state rules, there's local rules, and there's federal rules. And our staff is making sure that they're following those rules in a fair and consistent program and process. We do this with businesses. Municipalities, City of Stockton is one of the sites we go to. We also end up through the process talking to residents and individuals in the area. Just to give you an idea, district-wide, we do some 9,000 different inspections at permitted facilities, and we respond to almost 3,000 complaints a year. So as we talked about our facility inspections, we're determining that operations are in compliance with the state, federal, and local regulations. So the local would be the air district's regulations. Our inspections are unannounced, and we show up, meet the facility, and go through. Oftentimes, depending on the size of the facility, there can be several hundred permit conditions and requirements that we're checking with the facility and going over to make sure that they're meeting the requirements and understanding what the requirements are. Along the way, we also have some monitoring equipment. So our inspectors can carry portable analyzers that can be used to detect combustion gas numbers. So if you have a boiler, we can put a probe in it and make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing for what it's permitted for at all these different levels. Just a couple of pictures of people out at different sites doing their job, looking at different monitoring requirement conditions. I have to admit, I don't know what they're looking at there, but it's not unusual to read a gauge and have a limit on it and keep notes of what that is to verify they're in compliance with proper operation requirements. As we also conduct the site inspections, we follow up on complaint investigations. There are startup inspections for new facilities, which can be facilities with new permits, and brand new facilities. So we're going through all those, making sure they understand and are in compliance. There's breakdown investigations, so that when equipment does fail, we make sure that proper procedures are followed, that excess emissions are reported and taken care of, and that the process was properly documented. Another part that we do is we have requirements that emission sources be tested. Depending on the type of operation, the frequency can vary, but we have our staff trained to go out there and observe the third-party tests. So if someone has a site and they have a boiler, they have to get it tested. They can't do the testing themselves. They hire a third-party contractor that's often approved list. We go out there and can make sure that the third-party contractor is performing the test properly and reporting the numbers correctly. And we send our staff to training so that they're aware of what to look for and how that process works. Just some different pictures of people out at different sites. During the time period from November through February, the district devotes a lot of resources to the wood burning fireplaces and heaters. And while I know this wasn't one of the measures that made the list for the Stockton 617 area, we still get out into the area on a regular basis, seeing all areas of the valley on an equal distribution, as we also follow up with complaints. If we have areas that have high complaints, we get out and take a look at those more frequently. We are conducting this monitoring on weekdays, weekends, holidays, and during nighttime hours. And there's a picture on the next slide that shows you what we can do with a nighttime picture. We have a special low light imaging camera that helps detect smoke coming from fireplaces. Any new EPA wood burning device has to go through the EPA certification process. And then finally, anybody that receives a violation from us for operating a wood burning device when they shouldn't be, also receives information about the different grant incentives that are available to them. And I know if I start to talk a little too fast because I'm getting nervous, please let me know and I can slow down. Here we have on the left-hand side, you see smoke coming out. That's a picture taken at nighttime with the special lens, and you can see the smoke, and it's kind of indicative because it drifts off, obviously coming from a chimney. And so we've got staff out doing that on a regular basis. We conduct fugitive dust inspections. A lot of those are construction sites, road widening sites, bulk material storage, including open areas. Sites like construction sites are required to have a dust control plan. We're getting out to those sites and making sure that they're following the plan to control their fugitive emissions. And we conduct those inspections. If they're not, we take appropriate action, which in most cases is getting them to return to compliance and issuing violations, notices of violations to them for where they were not in compliance with them. Everyone that
Can I interject here? This is Margot talking. Do they notify you? How do you know about them? How do you know about construction sites? Is it people reporting it to you, or does the contractor actually let you know ahead of time?
Sure, Margot, let me try and answer that question. It's a good question. So before the work starts, the sites are required to notify us of the construction activity taking place, and they're required to have taken a dust control plan class and submit what the control plan for that is going to be before the work takes place. Now, there are times when that doesn't happen, and we can find that out through a variety of different means. It could be complaints, or it could be our inspectors are out there and see it. We stop in, and if they've doing a project that requires a dust control plan and they haven't done one, we educate them on what that process should be and issue violation notices to them so that to get them going down the right path.
A couple clarifying. So what John's saying is accurate. So we actually have a series of rules that deal specifically with fugitive dust. We call them our 8,000 series of rules. There are requirements for any construction activities greater than, so pretty much if it's over an acre in size, the project needs to be notified to us. And there's different levels depending on the size and the amount of materials that are going to be moved. For smaller projects, residential between 1 and 5 acres, they have to, it's a kind of a more simple form. They have to give us the names and contacts in case there are any issues that we hear about, so that we can call them, talk to them, make sure that they're being taken care of. In addition to that, obviously we'll follow it up with a site inspection as well to make sure that any potential issues are being taken care of. If for larger projects, they actually have to submit what's called a dust control plan. And it's a much more detailed plan. It basically covers all the different components of a construction project, from how and where trucks can come in and out, the requirements to make sure that there's no carry out or track out of dust or dirt onto paved roads from the site, ensuring that water is being applied to limit the amount of dust from vehicle traffic on unpaved portions of the project, in addition to record keeping requirements to make sure that they're complying with all of those things. And then lastly, contact information that we can contact them and at any time, given the potential circumstances for impacts of the projects. Did that? I mean, there are other tools that we use in addition to that. We have staff in the area, if not daily, very, very often, and they're trained to look for dust sites or construction sites, and to see if there are any that should or do not have any of the necessary notifications or plans with the district. And then there's other tools available to us, state tools that we utilize to find out about additional projects. But the other thing is, yes, we do also receive complaints and notifications from the public, which definitely is a huge help in this overall enforcement effort.
Great. Margot, did that take care of your questions?
I was muted. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Ryan, thank you for jumping in. Sometimes nerves get the best of us. I get, and yeah, and as Ryan said, we respond obviously to citizen complaints and follow up on those and get back with people. Here, just a couple of pictures of different fugitive dust, construction site, and some bulk material movement around an area. When the district takes enforcement action, we discover a violation, or when one is self-reported from a facility, we have a couple of options. One is a notice to comply, which typically serves as a warning. This is used in a limited manner for first-time minor violations. A lot of those are usually administrative. Paperwork was not turned in, wasn't turned in on time, and the first time you go through that, you get a warning, and they're pretty limited opportunities. The second step is a notice of violation, which I've mentioned other times here. So we've documented a violation, we've issued the operator a notice of violation, and that typically leads to some type of civil penalty assessment through that's consistent with state law that puts out guidelines over what settlements, how violations can be settled and the amount they can be settled for. The district runs a operation called Mutual Settlements Program, and so it keeps alleged violations out of court. Not that we're afraid to go to court, not that we haven't gone to court, but generally we try and work through a process where we offer each party involved the chance to kind of explain what happened, why it happened, and then we based on what they may have to say, we come to a settlement and a mutual agreement over what that penalty amount should be and how it will be settled. And then we do have a few cases where we do go to court to resolve matters that through one means or another we can't come to an agreement over how to settle it. So that's a small percentage, but it does happen from time to time. The district operates a complaint process. We respond to all complaints, and we try to respond to them in a quick manner. It has one of the highest level priorities for our staff. We have inspectors available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to take phone calls. We also offer a bilingual complaint line, and we utilize a translation service if the complaint isn't in English or Spanish. And we can and that's just a process of connecting with a prepaid service to make that connection. Complaints can be filed by telephone, online, or through our mobile app. And I think we've discussed those here with the group before, but we can certainly provide more information. And then our inspectors work really hard to maintain communication and let the person filing the complaint, if they leave a name and they want to know, to let them know what the resolution is. Sometimes some of these complaints are out of our jurisdiction, and we work to put them in contact with the appropriate agency and the appropriate person so that it can be properly addressed. So now we're into what the SERP measures are for the Stockton community. And
really quickly, I don't know if you have the opportunity. We do have a question from Douglas, and it might be about that previous section.
Oh, sure.
Do you want to take?
Thank you, Erica. Forgive me. I right now the presentation is good. I don't understand it, you know, when the presentation get too lengthily. I'm kind of lost in translation. What are we talking about regarding filing complaint? Like, are you talking about the carb? Are you talking about the air monitor? Because I'm lost in translation when you go on and on and on, and my interpreter is tiny, so I'm kind of lost. I'm getting too many information, and it's overwhelming me right now. So I'm kind of lost what your presentation is about. My apology. So
no, Doug, that makes total sense, and this is definitely like one of those things that we talk about, learning experiences and how we can communicate better with people. Totally get what you're saying. Like, you know, we talk about complaints, but it you know, using the word complaint doesn't necessarily really capture what we're talking about. And so when we're talking about complaints, it's air pollution related events that are impacting people. And so we have a service where when you're experiencing problems with air quality, and it may even be instances where you don't necessarily know, you know, what's the source, but that there's something that is impacting you, that we provide a service, we go out and we investigate those situations. So some of the typical types of complaints that we get, for example, are illegal burning, you know, people burning illegally. That's a very common one. Fugitive dust, you know, construction sites generating dust and impacting people. At gas stations, equipment may be broken. You know, they may be like nozzles may be leaking or other things. Those are also types of complaints that we as an organization respond to. Another would be, for example, if you're seeing emissions from a source that you believe is permitted with the district. We receive complaints about that. And then in addition to that is odor complaints. You know, if you're smelling something and it's impacting you, those are also common types of complaints that we receive and respond to.
okay, but do the people does make complaint? Does it go to the city and make complaint? Because that's something I would do, but did they forward to you guys, or they go to the organization, the air quality monitor? A lot of people will not know that. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and that's why we wanted this here. I think that we just, it's one of those things that we need to continue to talk about, to continue to educate people on how to, and that's actually part of the commitments of the AB 617 is part of this education. If there's air pollution related events, the people that you want to contact typically is your local air pollution control district, which is us. If it's now that's for the majority of stationary based complaints. The other types of complaints would be if it's a mobile source, consumer products, those types of things. A lot of that falls under the California Air Resources Board. But I think if there's any confusion, always feel comfortable contacting us, and we will definitely reach out and find the right organization to respond to your complaint if it isn't us. We're not going to steer you away and tell you to go contact someone else. We'll definitely work with you to try to find the right person for you to speak with to help you out.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for clarifying. Thank you.
Sure. And Douglas, I apologize. You know, I've been doing this for a lot of years. So when I say complaint, it's clear to me what I'm talking about. And it's a good reminder to slow it down a little bit. So, and Ryan's correct. Most of our complaints come in via a phone call. We keep that information confidential. So we don't, when we go out and investigate, we don't say, oh yeah, this complaint came from your neighbor, Douglas. We keep that confidential. Some people that upsets and because they want to know who's complaining about them. In my years of doing this, we've never revealed that information. So we investigate it. We're fair and equal about it, and then we'll follow up with you if you're the complainant with what we found, either phone call, email. In some cases, we have people that don't want to follow up. They've called it in, they've had their say, and they're done with it. But we try and do our best to meet with what helps you. So I hope that helps clarify. And please, yeah, feel free. I know I start going too fast sometimes, and I'll try and slow it down. So for the SERP measures that were enacted here in Stockton, one of the first one was to increase inspection frequency at facilities that had emission-related violations within the past year. And so we've implemented that and are in the process of getting that done and increasing those to, instead of an annual, there's very variable inspection frequency rates. But in this case, we're taking the ones with emission-related violations to every 6 months. Then we're also enhanced enforcement for fugitive dust requirements. So we kind of talked previously about the Regulation 8, the dust control requirements and the dust control plan. So we're going to do increased inspections of those and looking for those. And then the last one is increased anti-idling regulations. We'll work with Carb and get out and take a look at the different areas. And I was going to say, especially in these areas, if you as community members have areas that it would be good for us to get out and take a look at, or areas that you think would be valuable to review, please share those with us, and we will try and do our best to get out there. I see some hands raised, so maybe we'll take some more questions.
Yeah, we've got Matt and then Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. John, I was just curious because I'm looking at the online forum, and has there been any effort to try to, I don't know, make a user-friendly mobile app? You know, if you notice something, you're usually out and about. I'm just wondering, is there any reason why, you know, somebody couldn't design a more accessible entry app for the complaint process? Because I've looked at that before in a different air district, and I feel like there was a reason why they hadn't done that. So I just want to know if that's something you've chewed on at all. I'll just leave it at that. That's good.
Hey, no, I appreciate that, Matt. And I always like when people set us up and we could say, you know what, that's a fantastic idea. We've done it. And so this is an opportunity for us to pitch our app. It's available both on on Android and iPhone. It's the Valley Air app. And so if you have that app downloaded, there's a simplified form to fill out any complaints, and you can upload pictures and videos through that app as well.
All right, I think Mary Elizabeth, I think you were next.
Yep, Mary's next, and then I see Taylor as well, and then we'll jump back to you, John. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So that was a part of, just to follow up with that, my first notion is that, you know, we should be seeing, you know, how to get to the website or how to get to the app to actually make the complaint. And then I'm trying to think of that song, you know, like, what have you done for me lately? And so are we going to be getting regular updates on inspections after the official adoption by Carb, or should we already be doing this? Is this already, now we adopted it at the Air District, should we already be starting on these enhanced inspections? And then, you know, when we can see some inspection statistics.
Sure. Yeah. So let me, I'll let Ryan go. It looks like he beat me to it.
So to answer your question, yes, we've started the process. So John started talking about these enhanced enforcement measures. Part of today's presentation is to kind of cue that up, but also to talk about what we've done in other communities, but also to hear feedback from this community on what they would want from this measure. So what we've done for other communities is we provide quarterly updates with the inspections and what we've done for the other measures as updates, including like the inspections and the violations, that type of information. Specific information, like specific NOV, notice of violation information, who we've issued to, has typically been put into the annual report that we submit to the California Resources Board and work with the Community Steering Committee on. That's where we've typically had that information. But yeah, I mean, we're open to what the committee is interested in, how often they want to hear it, and receive or get updates on it. Quarterly seems pretty good and I mean, it's been even a challenge in the other committees because once we get into the agenda setting meetings, sometimes the enforcement due to other priorities of the committee have been pushed to later meetings, but it's entirely up to this committee.
All right, I think, I hope that, Mary, that answers your question. And if not, we're certainly happy to take more. And then Taylor, I think you're up next.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, my connection said unstable, so I'm sorry if this was just answered and I missed it, but I just want to clarify a quick point of my understanding is that these implementation CERT measures are not funded by OCAP dollars, so they didn't get a budget allocation through the CERT process. It's been a while since I think we've had the discussion of how we define enhanced enforcement or enhanced inspection frequency. But can we talk about what those terms actually mean and why they weren't being done before the passage of the CERT or the approval of the CERT?
Yeah, so we have commitments that we make to do inspections at facilities. That's like a standard practice. And we go out and do those inspections and at those facilities. What AB 617 looks at is ways that we can improve air quality in the communities. And so one of the things in talking with the committee and trying to come up with ideas on ways to do that is basically increasing the number of inspections beyond what is required and what is typically done. That is enhanced enforcement. And it's, as a organization, I mean, John covered it. We have, close, probably when you take into account all the different facilities, probably over 10,000 that we have to cover. And so while it'd be, we would love to be able to increase the number of inspections we do across the board, it's not feasible. It's not possible. And so, we have to come up with ways to do those inspections. Now, with AB 617 and working with steering committee members and the community members, if there are things that they want additional focus to, there's resources available to put to doing that work. And so enhanced enforcement is one of those things that we heard that the community was interested in having us do more of this focused effort and commitment of time and resources to do. And so that's what enhanced enforcement is.
I don't want to take up too much space. I do want to ask a quick clarifying question on that, though. Yeah. Just so, if you're not getting state dollars for that through 617, are you using your own budget for that staff time? You only have so much capacity.
I didn't clarify that. No, I mean, for the enhanced enforcement, the stuff that is above and beyond what we do for stationary sources, that is covered under that. And I know we've talked about it a few times, but it's not the incentive fund, it's the implementation funds.
Okay, got it. So it is pulling from state dollars. Okay, yeah. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more hands. John, do you have additional slides?
Okay, yes, I do. Let me, so just real quickly, we're doing increased frequency inspection every 6 months at facilities with that that have emission-related violations within the past 3 years. We're doing enhanced enforcement at Regulation 8 dust sites for looking for fugitive dust. And I think I pick up what that frequency is on another slide. And then we're also doing enhanced response to idling, anti-idling regulations, including working with Carb and working with the CSC to identify the best spots to go and look at that type of work. So I think a lot of this is kind of going to be repeat, but enhanced frequency is obviously those with the emission violations. We're going to get out to those at least twice per calendar year. Normal could be, depending on the operation, once a year. So we're adding an extra inspection, and we'll do so until for the next 5 years, or until there's 4 consecutive inspections without an emission violation. And then, you know, obviously the goal is to get out there, have more contact, have more on-site contact, and hopefully drive those emission-related violations down through an increased presence. And then, as was mentioned, also we're gonna provide quarterly updates with to the CSC over what's happening at those, and then an annual report comes out in addition. So increased inspection at the Regulation 8, the fugitive dust sites for the next 5 years. We're going to go out and do during the second and third quarters of each year an additional enforcement, looking for ongoing activities or inspections at sites that have dust control plans. We're obviously going to get out to sites with dust control plans, make sure that they're aware and following their requirements. And then looking for sites that have a history of dust complaints. We'll get out there and perform additional site inspections and keep an eye on those. And that's another site where we're looking for your input on where those sites might be. And then we're going to provide quarterly updates over these activities. The enhancement to the anti-idling. Oops, go ahead, Douglas.
Thank you. I have a question regarding to monitoring the community. Are you during the 5 year? Are you gonna do community reach out to educate the community, like on TV, radio, or something like that, to look at making, like, to turn in their car or truck or anything that vehicle that pollute, that did not pass the smog control, whatever? You follow, if that's fall in that category?
So I think if I'm understanding correctly, the increased, there is part of the CSC calls for, in other areas, calls for increased communication and outreach. And that's handled, we have an outreach and communication department, and they're going to take care of that part of how that takes place. I have to admit, I don't know what those plans being developed are, but I know that they're under development of how that's going to take place.
John, just to chime in real quick, and part of that, we'll come back to you all and ask you more about what type of outreach you think will work best. Okay. We've gotten some initial feedback from you all. You may recall we discussed this, I don't remember when, maybe 4 months ago, but it is also included in some of the specific measures. What type of, there's a couple of outreach measures, and it lists specific things that we'll be doing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Jamie. So anti-idling, we're looking for sites of where we can get out and enforce the state's idling restrictions. And obviously we're looking for your ideas about where it would be good to do that type of. So the plan is to report, or I guess what we want to talk about is the idea of having quarterly updates to include what we're finding with the enhanced inspection frequency. So the number of increased inspections, what type it is, and the number of enforcement actions taken. This is an example from the South Central one on the right-hand side, and it's probably hard to read, but that we followed kind of the same format with the other 617 communities. It would also, the quarterly update would also include information about the fugitive dust inspections and the anti-idling inspections, for what we're finding, sites looked at, and violations observed. In addition, there's going to be an annual report that's put together that will include a lot more detail, and Ryan already talked about it with information about the complaints, who was responsible, where it took place, what type of complaint, and how the resolution was come about and what it included. Annual report will also include information regarding notices of violations, notices to comply, and RCAT's a new term, not a new term to the group, record of corrective action taken. So if you saw something that could be a notice to comply and they take care of it right there while you're looking at it, you just document what that issue was. Anyways, but the annual report will include violation number, who was issued it, if there's a facility involved, who it is, location, description, and what rules were violated, and facility inspection information. Oops. And that was the end of my presentation. I know that Carb has some information that they want to add, but I wanted to see if there were any other questions. I appreciate everyone's patience, and I hope I answered your questions. And I look forward to any feedback you have.
Thanks, John. I do see a hand from Matt.
Yeah, that was awesome, John. Thanks for sort of letting us see under the hood on all this. And, I think going back to one of Taylor's questions that I want to get back to is, we all kind of have an idea of what our incentives budget looked like, but it's hard to know what we can ask of your division or Carb's division, because we don't really know what the allocations, these sort of internal implementation allocations are for Valley Air, for enforcement in Stockton's AB 617. I think, there's multiple communities in the Valley, and I don't know how much I want to know about that, but it's kind of hard to scope or right size how we support enforcement without knowing how much of the state's money came to Stockton for you to help us deal with enforcement. That's really not a question for you, John. I think that maybe is a question for Ryan as to how we work with this. And then I'll just say here that I think this is such an important part of AB 617. I think there's so much that we can get out of working closely with enforcement, that I really think working with you all is a subcommittee level scope of work. It's generative work. It's not transactional, but there should be some people meeting with y'all more than quarterly. I'm a nerd like that. I would be willing to do that. So that's just hollering that out there. So we can sort that out later, but thanks, John. It helps to see underneath there. Thank you.
Sure, and if I can just add in terms of complaints, you're right. I don't deal with the budget side of it, good or bad. But we're available. We make complaints a priority processing for our people. Our vehicles all have GPS in them, so when we get a complaint, we look to see who is the closest person to respond. We are not. I guess it's good to remember we are not emergency responders. And so, we've had times where people have called and said, my neighbor is burning the fence. I'm worried it's going to call my house, burn my house down. And on our first call is, okay, so let's notify the fire department. And then we can figure out, why that fire took off. We put a priority on complaint investigations, and we do our best to respond to them as quickly as is safely possible.
Thanks, John. I see Ryan's got his hand up to answer part of that question. And then also, while you're letting Ryan answer, there are some questions in the chat you might be able to answer on the chat. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I was actually looking at Jonathan's question about land use and projects that are being done within the AB 617 area, and so that is definitely something that we can talk about, and how we can share information with the steering committee on projects that are going in. We don't really view that as an enforcement. We actually have a separate department that works with cities and counties on proposed projects and provide commenting on that those projects. And we did include certain measures to work with those agencies and to make sure that we are providing comments on those projects and making sure that they're taking into consideration air quality impacts associated with those projects.
Excellent. Okay, I see two more hands from Taylor and then Mary Elizabeth. And then I want to move us on to the CARB presentation to make sure we have enough time to do our voting item at the right time according to the agenda at your request. So we will continue after these two comments or questions. Mary first, and then let's see. I can see. Oh, actually, Taylor first. You dropped your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Quick question about like jurisdiction. I guess you mentioned that the Air District enforces local and state and federal regulations, right? And recognizing that like CARB has an enforcement division, so does Cal EPA, and so does US EPA. Like where, like for instance, where is it the Air District's duty to enforce a regulation on like say passenger vehicles versus like CARB's enforcement division? Like, can you describe like where those jurisdictions cross? Is it geographical, or is there like a nature of the regulation? Just
there is, yeah. So that's a good topic, and maybe that's probably should have been slide number one, Taylor. So I apologize for that. So at the Air District, typically what we enforce and regulate are stationary sources of air pollution. So those are your businesses that have equipment that generate air pollution. It's the construction sites, the things that are fixed. The mobile sources, that's what falls under CARB's jurisdiction. Now, that being said, we do have a 1-800 number. If you saw a smoking vehicle, you can call it, and we send a letter out to them on that. But for heavy duty trucks, marine, ocean-going vessels, those types of things, those all fall under CARB's jurisdiction. So I mean, if you were seeing a cargo ship coming in and it's big black plume, the proper place to notify that type of complaint would be CARB. If you saw a black plume coming from a source at the port beside like one of the businesses at the port, that would be us. The other things that I think simplistically that's generally how it is. So stationary sources, and when John's talking about, we also enforce state and federal regulations. So if you're over a certain size of business, like you generate a lot of air pollution, you actually have to get what's called the Title V permit. And it's a federal permit, has federal conditions on it. Those facilities are subject not only to our rules and regulations, but also to federal regulations. And those are typically found in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's a different set of regulatory requirements, and the majority of the time those are added as conditions onto those permits. But we enforce both our regulations and the federal regulations. And then there are also some state requirements that we also enforce when it comes to stationary sources. One would be like, for example, visible emissions. We have a regulation. There's also a state regulation on it. And, abrasive blasting is another example where there's state regulations that we also enforce as part of our requirements.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Taylor. And Mary Elizabeth, I think you're our last question or comment on this section before we go to CARB.
Hi, thank you. So I'm hearing and reading, about CEQA comments. And I understand that the Air District does comments, and now there's a different group in Carb that does comments, and then there's another group in Carb that does comments. And I think it would be really important for our community to build capacity so that we are able to look at those CEQA documents in a lens that allows more meaningful comments that can evoke more mitigation, that particularly in our areas that are disadvantaged, because, you know, we need to be speaking up for ourselves as well. And I think that we need to have some more education to be able to do that effectively. And I look to the Air District and Carb, you know, to help us do that.
Thanks for that comment, Mary Elizabeth. Maybe that's a good segue to Carb if the Air District doesn't have a comment on that. I hear that request, and I see from Carb in the chat, Deldy saying that's a great suggestion. And I do see Scott with his hand up. So Scott, do you want to answer that, comment about that, and or take us to our presentation?
Yeah, well, actually, maybe I'll tee up before handing it over to Eric from our enforcement division for his piece of the presentation. But I did want to acknowledge, Mary Elizabeth, your comment and our offline emailing that we've been doing during the meeting. So I would love to connect with you in the next couple of days and have a chat about what that might look like and what you find valuable. And we can certainly kind of gear that towards something that you would find beneficial. So just wanted to comment on that. And we can talk a little bit more about kind of what the CEQA process is within CARB as well.
Great, Scott, thank you for the answer. And it looks like there might be other CSC members that might be interested in something like that as well. So if it is appropriate to share it with a larger group when you have gotten some momentum in that space, I think there might be some interest in seeing that. Okay, so there is just a little bit of time to talk about the CARB enforcement. And there's a presentation that the CARB team has, and I want to make sure that you all have that opportunity to hear from them. I also want to make sure that we have a time check because I did want to flag that we are slated to do a possible vote on the charter tonight. And so we certainly don't want to leave that to the very end when we have some drop-offs. So we are going to try and take this item as quickly as possible to make sure that we do get to that discussion and possible vote before the agendized conversation is beyond our window of time for this meeting. All right, so CARB team, take it away.
Thanks, Erica. And I think this will be pretty quick. My name is Eric Bissinger, and I'm with the Enforcement Division's Community Outreach section. And my presentation is going to be on the 7 strategies listed in the enforcement plan. So next slide. The first strategy listed in the enforcement plan is to increase the frequency of inspections. In our 3-year enforcement history in Stockton, we noted that there are very few inspections of transport refrigeration units or refrigerated trailers. And so we were already planning to do inspections at cold storage facilities in July. And the locations listed on this slide and in the enforcement plan are locations that we heard the community members speak about during the monthly steering committee meetings. Since our field staff will be coming to Stockton in July, please let me know if there are other locations that you would like our field staff to inspect. You know, if you see excessive idling or smoking vehicles or something that's not on this slide. And then last April, I went through our off-road database and identified 6 companies that had tier 1 or tier 2 engines listed in their active fleet, their construction fleet. So in May, our field staff went to each of these locations and determined that these companies are no longer in business and they're not operating in the boundary. So these are just some examples of our enhanced enforcement efforts so far. And also, we hope to deploy our PEAK system in the Stockton boundary at some point. The PEAK system stands for Portable Emission Acquisition System. And basically what it is, it's a portable emission reader and a license plate reader that the trucks go underneath it, and it reads the emissions in the license plate and gives us a report, and we can follow up on anything that looks, not correct. So again, I just want to point out that please reach out to me and let me know if there's other places we can go to. Next slide. The second strategy listed is community training. So as you know, in-person training has changed quite a bit in the last year, but we do not want to let that deter our outreach and our training efforts. Last year, during the COVID restrictions, we began developing YouTube training videos, and those should be available soon and on our website. And I'll let you know when that happens. And in the past, we have provided personal in-person training to other 617 communities on subjects like supplemental environmental projects, how to identify and report an air pollution complaint, and how to access the Carb Enforcement data. So these are just some ideas. Please let me know if there are specific types of training or enforcement subject that you would like to take to learn more about, and we can do a deeper dive on that subject. Next slide. Truck and bus. We have good news for the truck and bus rule. Recently, the board approved the Enforcement Division's annual report, and in that report, the compliance rate for the truck and bus rule has risen to 98% compliant. And this is due to the fact that truck owners now must document their vehicle is compliant with the regulation in order to get their registration for DMV. So they have to be, if the truck is not compliant, they cannot get registered in California. So we're looking at a 98% on that one. And we're going to continue to work with DMV to ensure that we can reach that last non-compliant 2%. We are also shifting our focus on out-of-state vehicles. The PEAK system that I mentioned earlier will help us find out-of-state vehicles that are not compliant or smoking. And so next slide. Here, what we had in mind here is to seek opportunities to coordinate with other agencies with enforcement authority in Stockton, such as the district, of course, the city of Stockton, local police departments, CHP, school districts, other Cal EPA sister agencies. For example, we may want to work with the city of Stockton to provide no idling signs in areas that the community has observed truck idling. We can also work with the school district and provide anti-idling signs for the schools. We can work with the local police department in cooperation with the district on illegal idling. We can provide input on truck routes, provide input with illegal truck parking. We can also work with the Port of Stockton to ensure compliance in and around the port. In addition, we can work with local environmental groups or individuals to help develop air-related projects with funding paid by past violators through our Supplemental Environmental Project Program, or SEPs. The SEP program can fund community projects through money collected through settlement agreements brought about through our enforcement cases when we settle. So there's lots of opportunities, and we look forward to working with everyone. Next slide. In my last presentation back in September, I gave a quick run through of our enforcement data visualization tool. This is a tool that maps out all of Carb's enforcement activities throughout the state and can be sorted by zip codes, and it can be sorted by 617 boundaries. Currently, this tool is updated yearly, but to meet our enhancement goals, we are working to have this system updated on a quarterly basis so communities can have this information in a more timely manner. We're also working with the Cal EPA to update the online complaint reporting system, We were hoping to make this system easier to use and have the ability to get a more robust information where we can actually respond to and begin an investigation or inspection. We did notice that many complaints go unanswered because there's not enough information given in the complaint for us to follow through on. So, Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, first off, I just wanted to thank you. This is a lot of information that I can totally see the applicability of it. And so I have a statement, which is that I really do think, since we're trying to fix Stockton, we need an enforcement subcommittee that meets with Carb and Valley Air staff. Your two realms don't work for me. I think I've said that before, between mobile and stationary sources. And I'd love to use AB 617 to help bridge that system. And I wanted to ask you, Eric, about the peak system. If you knew that we have almost $10 million set aside to deal with bad trucks in the study area, and it would be wonderful to have that money targeted at bad actor trucks that are in use locally, as opposed to defaulting to who has the bandwidth to apply for that funding. It'd be great. We sniff out a bad truck and we approach that person with a solution. If they're from Sacramento, we'll go punitive on them. But if they're from Stockton, we might have a solution for them in our incentives budget. So that was, that's a suggestion that things that are triggered here, we have a solution for. And then because you brought up SEPs, I want to go back to a Valley Air question, which is, when people are fined for a violation, where's that money go? I know in California, stings Volkswagen, it goes into a pot, and there's a way for the impacted community to get a piece of that action. So I actually have a Valley Air question that's unfairly being thrown in here. What happens to fines and violations in our community, and how do we make sure that that money stays here? So that's for somebody else, Eric. Sorry.
That's all right. You want to give that a shot, Ryan, or want to take
Yeah,
that?
no, I'm happy to answer that question. So to answer your question, Matt, the violations that are settled go into the district's general fund, and asking how it benefits. Well, the district uses the general fund to ensure we have staffing to be able to do enforcement. So I mean, it does make its way back into Stockton through through air monitoring efforts, through enforcement staff that are in the area doing work. So the penalty settlements do make their way back through those things.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, it'd just be one of those things that helps us all understand what's been done here already, so we can diffuse sort of this narrative that we're all starting from scratch. I know work's been happening here before. So it'd be one of those, I assume this is something that is audited at the state level for the number of enforcements and the dollar amounts and the locations of those enforcement actions. Those would all be things that we could really become champions for the Air District if we knew more about it.
Excellent, thank you. And I don't want to disacknowledge you, Mary Elizabeth, but we have a new hand. We haven't heard from Ed tonight, so I'm going to ask Ed to go first, and then I'll drop you in, Mary Elizabeth.
Thank you for taking my question. Matt, I want to follow up with some of your questions. June 2021, Carb came out with their annual enforcement report. You can pick it up on Carb website or one of the Carb, maybe Eric, you could put the website piece to that. There were 959 cases that amounted to $22 million plus worth of enforcement penalties that Carb put out last year. The one that I find really interesting is that they inspected 13,000 vehicles and marine vessels. 9,500 of them were in disadvantaged communities, which I find to be valuable. Eric talked about a 98% compliance rate. With all that said, there is a bit of a, and I'm just going to give my opinion because I've now been in 3 or 4 different heavy duty truck IM sessions where CARB is supposedly listening to industry on how we can make these kiosks work, because there's so many different truck computer systems, and this is down into the weeds, but I can tell you that there hasn't been a single meeting that industry feels like CARB is listening to. And so this kiosk, while it may work for some of the newer trucks, the ones that have the potential for the most pollution are going to be problematic for now. And there's some workarounds, some manual workarounds that they've talked about, but some of this heavy duty truck and bus is still in the works, and it's going to take a while before it becomes real in our communities.
Thanks for that comment, Ed. I didn't hear a question in that, but I want to make sure. Did you have any specific question, or was that just your comment?
No, the question was, I guess, if we can please get the CARB 2020 enforcement report posted so others can see it. And the other question is the Air District, and I did ask it in the chat, they also have an annual report, and it would be nice if that was available to the community.
Thanks for that, Ed.
Thank
And the CARB annual report has been linked in the chat, and then certainly requests to drop into the AB 617 website have been noted as well. And then Mary Elizabeth.
Yeah, just a quick one. I just came from a State Water Resources Control Board equity policy workshop where they were discussing racial equity. And when we're talking about these assignments of penalties, I really think that there should be a lens that we're looking at those penalties as to where they're located, and to make sure that if there's a polluter that's polluting in a disadvantaged area that historically has had some redlining associated with, or Enviro screen notification, that more penalties are assigned, because those people are already experiencing stress related to the air quality that they're exposed.
Thanks for that comment, Mary Elizabeth. And I see Douglas, your hand, and then we'll go back to CARB, and I think maybe close out this presentation.
I had to clarify what Mary Elizabeth, I keep bringing up the disadvantaged area. How do CARB or air quality won't recognize which area of disadvantaged location on the south side of Stockton? We're in the on the square diameter, and the majority are disadvantaged through Stockton area. So we have not got any much of representation even through the city, but also there's a lot of areas that are disadvantaged area. So how can you identify those particular areas that is top priority needed in those particular situations? So that's what my concern is about that too. So as a resident, I just want to make sure that all aspect of a resident in Stockton, South Stockton is represented fairly and equally in equity as far as that concern also. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is a goal of the enforcement division here at CARB to be above 50% as far as where we are for disadvantaged communities.
Repeat that again. You heard my interpreter couldn't hear what you're saying. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Doug. It is a goal of CARB enforcement that we are enforcing these. Our enforcement team is in disadvantaged communities above 50% of the time. So, I mean, that doesn't just include Stockton. It's all, statewide goal. And that's in the annual report, if you, which is now in the chat. You can see the percentages.
Okay, but at the third committee, we're gonna focus on the district. I know every district has the Fresno district, or Marine Quality. Here you're talking about statewide. What about at the local level? Is that can you do that in the statewide than the local in the county?
Yeah, I mean, just the 617 boundary is going to be a high priority for sure, and that includes Stockton.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Hi, this is also Warren. Eric and I work together, and that's part of us coming to you today to talk, is also to get your opinion or your thoughts on where we should be in Stockton community. So for in areas that you don't think to be the best place for us to be, let us know, and we can adjust our enforcement mechanisms.
Great, thank you both. So I'm going to ask the CARB team how much more you have on your presentation time, just because we do have a voting item tonight, and I want to be respectful of the CSC's members' intent and the option to vote, which we'll do a verbal roll call. That'll take a little bit of time. Do we have a few more minutes or a few more slides, or is this the end?
I think I'm down to my last 3 slides. So Hannah, can we go to the next one, and I'll finish up.
Thank you guys so much.
I got to figure out where I am. Okay, yes. So Carb Enforcement, we're gonna provide annual reports of our activity within the Stockton boundary, along with the district. And we are also developing a quarterly update document that we can share with the steering committee on a quarterly basis that will give a brief summary of all our enforcement activities for that quarter. Next slide. And on this one, we wanted to leave the enforcement plan as an active living document that can change as the city's needs change or as regulations change. The community might also want to focus our enforcement efforts on a particular type of mobile or diesel fuel equipment, or the community might want us to check compliance on a large construction project and look at their off-road equipment. Also, the focus may change as new regulations are adopted. So we want to be open and add or change strategies as implementation of the CERP continues to grow. The steering committee might also want to look at other 617 communities and adopt similar programs that have been successful over there. And so next slide. And that concludes our enforcement presentation.
Wonderful, thank you guys so much. And I do think most of the questions might have already been asked, but I am going to request that the CSC put any additional questions for the CARB team in the chat so that they can answer them. And Eric and Warren, potentially, if you can answer any additional straggling questions in the chat, we would really appreciate it. We do want to continue with the rest of our agenda so that we aren't doing any voting after our designated meeting hours. All right, seeing no objections, we're going to move forward in that way, and we're going to move to our agenda item on the charter. Thank you to everyone who's presented so far, all the fantastic questions, and again, trying to honor your space, but also making sure that you are getting the time you need for a potential vote tonight. So our next agenda item is actually to review and discuss the amendments to the charter. And at the last meeting, you guys, actually the last 2 meetings, you've gotten some great suggestions from this group about refinements and clarifying language and other things that this committee really thought were important for governing this committee moving forward. So Ryan's actually going to walk you through those changes very quickly, and then we have the opportunity to vote on that charter and adopting those amendments tonight if you feel like it's substantively close to what you think reflects the desires and will of this committee. Not 100% perfect, just substantively close. Ryan, I'm going to hand it over to you to show everyone how to get to the charter.
Yeah, thank you. All right. All right, can everybody see the screen? That's not it. Things popping up all the time. Can everybody see the district website? All right, good. I'm learning from Jess Colson to start to remind everybody where to navigate to get to the information. So clicking AB 617 and then the Stockton community And then over here on the right-hand side, we have the steering committee documents. In addition, so up here we have the latest version of the draft that was sent to everybody, and definitely apologize for not having the correct link in the email that we sent out yesterday. So we heard a few things that the steering committee was looking to have updated. And so the yellow were the changes that were made to the document and were shared with the steering committee during last month's meeting. The things in blue were the new additions. So for example, here we just to add brevity to the document, instead of we added the agenda settings as a term of use in the document. One of the things we heard was the desire for a language to be added into the charter that talks about the need for a quorum to be able to take a vote. In this case, I think right now we have 40 steering committee members. So in which case, in order to have a quorum, we need 20 of the voting members. So let me rephrase that. So it's a majority of the voting members of the steering committee. So a majority, 50+1 of current members of the CSC, not including members on a leave of absence, shall constitute a quorum. Vacant seats shall not count as a current members. Each member of the CSC shall be entitled to one vote. A vote of the majority of the CSC with at least a quorum in attendance shall be required to take action and or make a committee-wide recommendation. CSC members shall be present for voting on all agenda issues. No proxy or absentee voting shall be permitted. And as I was talking about this language does not include ex officio members. And so I think we probably do need to add language in here that covers the ex officio members, so that it makes it clear that it's limited to voting members of the steering committee. Anybody have any questions, comments? And did this capture what everybody was thinking about in terms of quorum and needing to be able to vote on these?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could add in there, when it says no proxy or absentee voting shall be permitted except by official alternate.
Yeah, in that case, they're not proxy or absentee voting. They're actually voting on behalf of themselves.
Okay, so maybe current members and alternates, or I guess.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, Mary Elizabeth, and so maybe it should be a majority of current members or alternate members in attendance for primary members.
Yeah. Just there should be something in there that an alternate, can vote if the current member is not there.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Mary. Any other comments on this section? All right, good. Thanks. Just some added language that we incorporate in here about agenda setting meetings and things that get brought up in those meetings. If they don't make it onto that upcoming meeting, that we'll retain those and that there'll be potential topics for future meetings. So we added language in. So the agendas and agenda topics will be informed by committee input at the monthly agenda setting meetings, developed with the co-leads and all CS members in attendance during the agenda setting meeting, and will include the time, date, duration, location, topics to be discussed. Topics for discussion not included in the meeting agenda will be retained for discussion at the next agenda setting meeting. So the next section was subcommittees, and we heard some feedback. So we added some language here. Should the subcommittee request to bring in action before the CSC, the district will work with the co-leads. This should say co-leads and some committee members to ensure that the recommendation and proposed action is on the next CSC meeting agenda as appropriate. Subcommittee meeting agenda summaries and action items will be posted to the district website. CSC member participation roles and responsibilities, including the role of alternates as applicable, apply to subcommittee meetings. So just some clarification language there as well.
And then Ryan, I do see two hands, one from Regina and one from Ned. And I think Regina's hand's been up since the previous section, so it's possible it was on the other piece.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for taking my question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, was there any mention of recusal for businesses that may have voting rights?
Yes, we included, that was in the last time, and let me pull up that section. It's right here. Committee members may not vote on and must recuse themselves from any vote on any matter if it is foreseeable that the outcome of the decision will have a direct financial impact on the member's personal finances or other financial interests.
Can you repeat that again? I think you did it too, you talked too fast.
Yeah, sorry, Doug. So it says committee members may not vote on and must recuse themselves from any vote on any matter if it is foreseeable that the outcome of the decision will have a direct financial impact on the member's personal finances or other financial interests.
Thanks, Ryan. And then we've got a hand from Ned.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Ned.
Hi. It looks like you took a stab at one of my concerns is agenda setting, and it does seem like there's a fairly liberal provision for agenda setting, but just to refresh everyone's memory, all of the formal committees I belong to, it took 2 members to put something on the agenda. And if we take a look at meeting schedule and agendas, it starts off upon consensus agreement, and then it goes through a list of other things. You know, so let's be just careful here. We don't mean upon consensus agreement, an item has to have to go on the agenda. If it's just raised at one of these meetings, not subsequent meeting, certainly shortly thereafter, it will go on.
Ned, I don't know if everyone else is hearing Ned's breaking up at pretty important words. Did anyone else catch?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. There you go. That's a little better.
Okay. It says upon consensus agreement, and then there's a list of items that includes agenda setting. Now, I think I read this paragraph to say that any one person could bring up an issue at an agenda setting meeting, any one person. And if that's not adopted for the current agenda, it must appear on a subsequent agenda. As I said before, every organization I've been involved with, 2 members are needed for a matter to go on the agenda. So what is the interpretation of this paragraph?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ned. So the first part where it says upon consensus agreement of the committee, this sentence specifically deals with the schedule of the meetings. So for us to be able to move a meeting, that sentence only applies to the moving of meetings. We need consensus from the steering committee on any other day that we're going to move it to, and to move it. So the agenda setting, what we're saying here is, so typically, and I know that you've made several of the meetings and you've seen, there's typically between probably 5 and 10 steering committee members at those meetings. And we talk about potential topics. So what this is saying is that we would take the topics that we're hearing, the interest from the people that are in those meetings, and kind of figuring out how much time it's going to take for those different topics, and figuring out what we can cover within the 2 hours of that meeting, and then adding those to it. Any items that we do not add to that meeting, we will retain and we will talk about at the next agenda setting meeting as a possible topic for that meeting.
Talk about at the next agenda setting meeting.
Correct.
But not necessarily put it on the agenda for the steering committee. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean,
Why not have the type of rule that you have with CARB, with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, with the Stockton City Council, every board and commission that I have ever served on, which is if 2 members want something on an agenda, it goes on the agenda.
Yeah, I think there are examples of ways to do things. I think this is our attempt to capture and making sure that the focus of meetings are what the majority of the steering committees want to discuss and work.
That is not how these rules are made. You know, they aren't made to put something on an agenda by majority vote. That's the oppression of a majority. When you have 2 or 3 people that say, we want this on the agenda, if it's the city council or it's the governing organization here, it's a numerical 2. There's too much discretion, and this has been a big problem. I think I was very clear in citing the authority for 2-member vote. And then for it to show up like this, and then for me to hear you say, well, then the agenda setting group will consider it in the future, versus having some clear numeric threshold. Make it 3 members or something, but don't make it a majority.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we have these meetings to not only hear from you, but the rest of the steering committee members on what they think, how this should be included in the charter.
Why do we have to be, I mean, so out of step with this? Okay, you've heard me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned, for this. Thank you for this comment, Ned. And I do see 2 other hands. And if you all certainly are in accordance or in agreement with Ned, now's a great time to raise your hand. I see Douglas and Matt, and then we are over time on this item, so I want to be respectful of that. I see Matt's hand went down, so I'll go to Douglas. And Matt, if you want to speak, definitely raise your hand again, and then we'll come back to this charter. Douglas.
I'm a little concerned about, just because of the majority, legalism going on the agenda. I mean, I'm thinking about resident versus the CSC. I mean, if one member would like to have something to discuss about, it shouldn't be, that's called, I believe when that's what it's the opposite of voting suppression, meaning that if you have to have required 2 or 3, the majority agree with you. I don't think that's not what the committee was for, is to have the community in agreement of all of an agreement, not just 1 or 3 in agreement and take it, or over hostile of that. So I just think that the agreement with this committee is that to make sure that all residents are included with the meeting, with the adoption. Instead of being 2, it should be 1 at the minority. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. So what I'm hearing, though, is that there's 2 different trains of thought, schools of thought on this. One is that you need a first and a second to put something on an agenda, and others is that any person that's interested in bringing an item forward could bring it to that agenda setting committee, have it considered and brought forward to either the next meeting or a future meeting, depending on the time constraints of your meetings. Obviously, this committee works for 2-hour meetings typically. Certainly, if you put every potential item on an agenda, I think you'd have much longer meetings. So that's certainly something for you to consider. But those are the 2 things that are being discussed right now, and certainly for adjustment potentially in the language here. I want to look at the clock briefly. It's 6:55. I knew we were going to be very, very close on time. We cannot do a verbal roll call in 4 minutes to achieve the voting item before this designated meeting time. And this committee was pretty clear that we wanted to make sure all votes were taken during the designated meeting time. So I don't think we can vote today. We are nearing our time for public comment. So I'd like to let Ryan continue with going through the adjustments he's made and then recommend to the committee that we bring this to a discussion at the next meeting, since we can't actively go through a roll call vote tonight with the time we have allowed. Ryan, I don't see you on my screen, but I know you're still there. Does that work for you?
Yeah, no, I think, and we'll definitely make this the first item at the next meeting, so that we.
Thanks for that.
Vote.
Do you want to skim through the other substantive edits, and then I'll do a recap of what I heard you say you would make adjustments to? I don't think we got a consensus on these two, this specific item, whether it's one person or two. That could be something that's brought up again at the next meeting or in a follow-up via email.
Yeah, those were the changes.
Okay. Excellent. There's a number of things in the chat. I just want to skim through them briefly. I do think agenda comment, okay, there's certainly a blending of the two methods. So here's what I think we can do, and if we are able to, at the August meeting, we can come back with this item that needs to be kind of discussed amongst the group, and maybe we can find some consensus on a blend or a hybrid of these two to address your concerns around majority rule versus having those unheard voices also have the opportunity to be elevated. Certainly something to be discussed. Outside of that, was there any other topic that's on the charter or subject area within the charter that did not get addressed today that also needs to be considered in the language adjustments? Anything that you saw? Matt, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the voting and I'm glad that there's language in there about a quorum. We've seen that people have been confused about their votes. It's not like we're voting on surgery by Sunday. I think people can learn in between one meeting and the next, and that there could be a way to verify a vote. We're still living with a regime where this CSC isn't allowed to design the technical advisory group because of a vote that took place in March. If something's really close, I think that's a rare event if we plan for votes. But I think we're still sitting here living with the consequences of a poorly conducted vote that has had public retractions, and we're still living with the outcome of that vote. Happy to put it in text.
I understand what you're saying. You're looking for a contingency, some kind of language in there that allows for the committee to come back and discuss an item that's already been voted on, and creating parameters for how that would take place. Maybe 2/3, three-quarters, whatever percentage of the committee that allows that to move forward. So certainly, if you'd like to put it in text, I think that'd be helpful. Just drop it in the chat, and it'll be reflected accurately in the notes, and certainly in maybe the next version of the charter for this discussion. And there's also been discussion about adding that to the beginning of the agenda next time, so it's not all the way at the end of the agenda in the August meeting. Thanks for that comment. Okay, so we're running a little bit over time, and I think we are seeing that we can move this agenda item, the voting piece of it, certainly to the next meeting, and you'll have additional time to review that language. And I think the nice thing is that you're still guarded and guided by your current charter. So right now, you're still moving forward, you're still getting business done. This is a governance structure type activity that shouldn't be delaying too much of the work that you're doing, and you are still able to be productive. So that is a positive thing, but I think we certainly would want to wrap this discussion on the charter soon. So let's try and get all of your comments to the Air District today or this week or as soon as possible so that they're easily able to review before the August meeting. All right, let us move into our next agenda item, which I think is the wrap up. Thank goodness. We'll do it very quickly. If you give me 5 more minutes, we can do it fast. We want to, first of all, if you noticed today, we didn't have a community co-host, and we would absolutely love to have one for the next meeting, certainly a voting meeting. Those are always great to have co-host on. If you would like to be a co-host, please do drop your name in the chat, raise your hand, or in other ways volunteer so that you can help guide the structure of the meeting and determine the role that you play in it. We love to have additional support in that. A couple other things, CARB is planning to put together a meeting on the health effects of some of the air pollution discussions we've been having. They're going to provide an update, I think, on the status of that, so look for that in an email. There are still discussions happening about the technical advice committee or advisory committee, and so there's going to be a doodle poll on that process and that discussion. Please keep an eye out for that, and please do pay attention if that's something you're interested in being involved in and helping shape. I think your participation is welcome. And then the next meeting of the CSC is going to be Wednesday, August 4th. And during that discussion, you're really going to start getting into the business of SERP implementation and really thinking about where you go next from an implementation standpoint and those SERP measures in particular that you've worked so hard on. And there's some very specific things as it relates to the prioritization that was already done, and then some other ways to maybe combine measures. You all had given some input, and that's going to be directed in the next meeting too. So August is going to be a great meeting, I think, for a lot of productivity, whether it's discussion on the charter or discussion on the measures. Things are moving forward, and that's fantastic. The other thing that I think that you have heard from is that there's a meeting between now and the August meeting from CARB, big meeting on when you can provide public comments related to your SERP. So absolutely fantastic that there's lots moving this summer. We're going to move into the public comment stage of this meeting. And as you know, this meeting is public. So if there are any members that would like to comment via Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook Live, please do so now. If there are any members on Zoom, we're going to ask you to raise your hand on Zoom, and please do let us know you'd like to make a comment or drop that comment into the chat. We have received a few comments on the public Facebook pages, so let me go ahead and check. For you all, just to notice, there's someone that lives in South Stockton, 1 mile south of Highway 4, 4 blocks east of I-5, and she's breathing some gray and black dust in the last year, and her oxygen levels have dropped significantly. I think she's just making a comment that this work is important, that what you're doing is important, and she's certainly keeping an eye on this activity. And so as the SERP moves forward into this implementation of measures piece, people like this commenter are absolutely paying very close attention. And then there's a comment about voting to ease pressure over multiple meetings. And as you may see, person on the YouTube screen, we did delay that vote, so there isn't so much pressure. And as a reminder for the CSC, you know, at the previous meetings, you mentioned you don't want to wait till the very end to do a vote if possible. And so we have delayed that vote for another meeting, and we're going to put it higher up on the agenda to make sure you have enough time, and so that we can make sure that we have time to do the full roll call of our full 40-member CSC. So we are going to move that one forward to the next agenda, and that addresses that. Are there any other public comments that you have seen Air District team on Facebook or YouTube or on any other of your email channels?
No other comments.
Great, thank you. And then I am going to do a recap of the action items as you also requested, and then we're done. So give me 60 more seconds. So a couple quick things that came out of today's meeting. So Gil, if you think way back 2 hours ago, Gil's going to send an update to the Air District on the final date and time of the next school board meeting to make sure that you CSC members are able to provide public comment if you are able, and if you feel like you want to give input on that process. The CSC, you should send Scott Wall an email by 7/16, that's July 16th, if you plan to provide public comment at the CARB meeting that's coming up. If you do that in time, he can prioritize your comments ahead of the general public. Otherwise, you're going to have to get in the queue with the general public at that meeting. You should share any additional locations where heightened Air District enforcement is needed. And along those lines, you should also share those locations with the CARB team on additional enforcement. The CARB team's also going to be working with Mary Elizabeth and eventually the full CSC to train about the best process for providing CEQA comments. And then CARB's going to share that with the full CSC when it's appropriate. And then CSC is going to let CARB know if there are any additional training topics that you guys want for consideration that they can give you updates on or give you intel on, in the spirit of kind of making sure that you're fully informed and able to connect with the programs and the projects that they have going, which can be very technical. And then the annual enforcement reports from both CARB and the Air District can go on the Air District website for the Stockton CSC. And then in addition, the Air District's going to send all of the links used in today's meeting and some quick background about those in a follow-up email to you all so that there isn't confusion about what links are for what. There were a lot of links in the chat today. The other things is there are a couple of charter modifications. One was to reflect that ex officio members cannot vote. Another was to update language about voting by alternates, really to clarify that they were predetermined alternates and that those were clear. And then there's still a discussion about whether or not we need one or two people to request an agenda item and what the philosophical distinctions are there. So more discussion to be had there. And then there was an additional request on the charter language. So we're going to have a couple additional discussions about that. Matt wrote some things in the chat that I haven't had a chance to add to my notes yet, but specifically around how do we make, let me make sure if I don't have it. I don't know if I have it yet, but when I do see it, we did discuss it, and I think the intention is to make sure that there's as much as possible collaboration as possible. And if you have a change of mind after getting information from, you know, numerous meetings, is there a process to go through this with the CSC to revote or reconsider decisions that have previously been made? Understanding that you guys have to move forward, how do you still make adjustments to your decisions when it makes sense? So that's what Matt was hoping to add in, and he's going to send some language in the chat or via email. I think I captured all the to-dos, and I think I captured all of the notes. Did I miss anything before we head out? If I did, please raise your hand or drop it in the chat.
Erica, there was
one hand.
There was a good question in the chat. Can we share language would like to be included in the charter directly with the Air District so there's no guessing at meaning? So maybe we want to clarify that question for the greater good of the group. And that question came from Taylor. And I don't think we answered that in the chat.
I think that that's been an open opportunity. Yes, it's my understanding Air District team is accepting language for the charter. But Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I do believe that you can email them specific charter language in a format that works for them. Ryan, can you confirm?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yes.
Yes. The answer is yes. Feel free. And I don't think it's a never-ending editing process. I think it's as soon as possible, maybe so we can move into the next stage of the charter development and implementation. Matt, you had a hand up.
Yeah, I dropped it in the chat. I thank you for capturing those earlier comments, but I did ask back during the enforcement presentation that it's still foggy to me, and I'm sorry if I should have studied this better, but I don't know what the implementation allocation is for the Stockton service area for Carb and Valley Air staff. That's just the beginning of planning, is knowing how much coin there is.
So you're requesting.
Another quick item to make sure we're capturing everything, Erica, from this meeting is a suggestion from Nat to have the voting and charter discussion as the first agenda item at the next meeting. Just want to make sure we saw that.
Got it. Okay. I think we've captured all of the requests and the notes, but we aren't wordsmithing in this meeting. That's a very difficult thing. So to add, the request of many, drop your exact specific notes. Maybe I think if you can put comments in the PDF and send those to the Air District, that would be the perfect time and the way to get your language dropped in. And I think in the interest of time, since we're 3 meetings in with this charter, if we can have this be the last round of notes, I think we're very close according to what we've seen today. We're very close. So if you have specific language you'd like included, I think that's really helpful to help move that process forward. And I see lots of notes in the chat. And you guys provided fantastic feedback today. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think we've covered everyone's comments and questions, and we got through a lot of the agenda. We just didn't get to the vote, but we'll get to that next time. Again, thank you for your time. And unless the Air District team has any other final comments or any other CSC members with final comments, we're going to adjourn this meeting. Awesome. Well, thank you all. Good night.